Figure it out, Jay.
So good,
Time fella. This is how we approach every podcast episode. We're like, we look at all the notes we made and nah, we'll figure it out.
And here we are figuring it out in quite a surreal setting. Opus 40 is what this place is called.
Yeah, we're taking it outdoors, like the queers we are, and there's this incredible, basically it was a rock quarry and like a forest of glades and meadows that artist named Harvey Fight spent 37 years conceiving and building with his own, alone with his own two hands.
He turned the quarry into a giant sculpture, like basically a space to interact with.
Exactly, yeah, like all these walkways and figureheads, and he died making it.
Yeah.
He was riding a lawnmower and fell off one of the quarry faces down 12 feet and died.
That's
So it's that. And then obviously people in his estate, inspired by his work, spent the next 3 years turning it into Opus 40 in the way that it stands now. And it's absolutely stunning. We've managed to find a little...
It's here just outside Woodstock, New York, where we're currently staying.
The Woodstock.
The Woodstock, New York. So we were suggested to come here.
A last minute recommendation.
It sounded like the thing to do, and so here we are.
But the great Linda Epstein, who we're here to see, is who suggested we podcast here.
Yes.
Shout out to Linda.
So thank you for that, because this is such a gorgeous setting to be sitting talking to each other, rather than in a random motel room like we normally do it.
Well, we've done it in we've done all of our records all of it's been done in people's homes actually.
Oh yeah.
The Krabby Apples and the Leger Smalls are the hosts of our last few episodes.
Well,
Anywho, the next few are probably done in hotel rooms because
here we come across country.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Michael Earp.
And I'm Bailey Turner.
Welcome to Michael's Walk.
The podcast.
Michael's Walk is a road trip, a search for something. Spoilers! It's myself, and it was inside all along.
If only it were that simple.
Driven by Tori Amos's album, Scarlett's Walk, I'm recreating the journey Scarlett took in its 20th anniversary year.
I'll also be there.
With the loving and patient,
always patient,
support of Bailey and Teague Lee, 3 trans queers set out across America.
That's 33 states in 55 days.
To connect with the songs, the land that inspired them, and the fans inspired by the songs. We'll talk music, travel, healing, and hope as we ask the questions: how do I heal from 15 years of coercive control and manipulation?
And what role does the music we listen to play in our own relationship narratives?
We've self-produced this podcast and trip.
You can support us via GoFundMe.
For the full story, head to michaelerb.net.
We're talking about Gold Dust today.
Yeah, really, really special song.
It's beautiful.
Kind of from what I understand all about Tori's revisit to where her journey began as a singer in Washington, D.C., playing for politicians, and then she obviously grew up nearby in Baltimore. So it's all about that revisiting. It's all about that remembrance of relationships and memories long gone.
There's lots of looking back for Tori when she comes to these places. I can only imagine the depth of that. I mean, she talks about it in her book, Resistant, and we did what we felt we had to do, which was visit Mr. Henry's, where she got her first job as a piano player at age 13, a gay bar in DC.
It was such a cool spot. And they're still doing music, and they take great pride in how many people's careers they've launched.
Yeah, Roberta Fleck.
Which I didn't know, but is amazing.
Got her start in
Mr. Henry's as well.
Mr. Henry's too. It was great. And then we went from there to the Dewdrop Inn, because we had to do drop in.
We had to drop in at the Dewdrop Inn, which is, for those of you who are playing along at home, is a line from Muhammad My Friend, which is a song on the Boys for Pele album, but was also what Tori called the part of her tour where she was doing covers and requests, and it was kind of, so it's taken on a very, yes, and the name of the tour. So it was a very special kind of place for us to be checking out. And for me, it was far more enjoyable than Mr. Henry's. It was a much less intense vibe, and there are a bunch of cyclists just hanging out after their ride, and beers, and
like inside was empty because everyone just wanted to be sitting outside under the
marquees,
and my goodness, I'm just watching a man over on the far side of the meadow unpack what appears to be a whole bunch of bee costumes, giant insects coming out of plastic bags.
Oh my God, he really is.
It's
I wonder what's about to happen.
Oh my goodness. Are they puppets?
I think they are puppets, yeah. Ooh. So if there are no more episodes after this, you'll know we were taken by the insect man.
Yeah, those killer bees.
We also have a really great interview this episode to share with you.
Oh yeah, Geordie, Zekafus. Zekafus. I'm sorry, Geordie. My bad.
How embarrassing.
How embarrassment. I got to chat with Geordie while I was in isolation in Palm Springs, and Gold Dust is Geordie's all-time favourite Tory song, and it's beautiful hearing about his connection with it. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Geordie.
So, hey, Geordie. Thanks for chatting.
Hey.
I say this as if we haven't been just chatting for half an hour while I eat chicken wonton noodles in isolation.
It was
in
lovely.
Palm Springs. It was. So you reached out and said you wanted to chat in particular about Gold Dust. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Gold Dust and why it's special for you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, it is my favorite Tory song of all times. And it may be my most played song as well. I think it may also be just the most beautiful song in the canon of music and existence. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like it hits me every time. It never gets old. And for me, I am an extremely, I'm an emotional person. I live in my emotions often. And one of the feelings that sticks with me, or that I feel maybe the most, would be nostalgia. I live in that emotion quite frequently. And I think that Gold Dust is nostalgia, that the song creates that feeling for me. So it takes me back to my childhood. It takes me to many different places. It takes me where I need to go in that moment, usually, if I need a good cry, or if just recently I lost my grandmother a month and a half ago, and that song was there to hug me and helped me kind of connect to those memories of her and helped open up space for that. So it's quite beautiful and useful to me in that sense. But also something that I had kind of mentioned to you via text or whatever was that it also brings back a lot of, I guess, pain or past like religious trauma for me, because when I do kind of go back and it takes me back to my childhood, that was a huge part of my adolescence and growing up, was being in the closet, growing up in a religious household where I knew it was, not okay to be gay, to be out. And so I had this like internal struggle of identity. So there's this like bittersweetness that comes with Gold Dust as well.
Mm-mm.
And then on the other hand, it can, again, this song for me is just so multifaceted, because it can also do this thing where it can remind me that it's important to stay here in the moment, in whatever moment is happening. I mean, the lyric, I was here, right? And even though I have these painful memories from this time period in my life, a very long period of my life, up until I was 23 when I finally came out, it allows me to live in the here and now of I'm good now. I am happy with who I am, and still hold space for the wounded child that I was at the time. And so still be able to find the joy and the goodness in some of those childhood memories, even though they were shrouded in trauma as well, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Especially that we're talking about this like right after tour has ended. I mean, I was really gunning for Gold Dust to come out that final night, or any of those 3 nights in LA, but it's kind of like it's the perfect bookend to Scarlet's Walk. I think it wraps things up very nicely. Anytime there are chapters closing in my life, the song really becomes meaningful, and I want to listen to it often or frequently, because again, it allows for that space to the bittersweetness of mourning this loss of, something that has just closed, and I won't experience that again. Who knows what we'll experience in the future regarding a Tory tour, at least here in the States, who knows when it will be next, or if,
Hey, imagine how us Australians feel.
I cannot.
we get like 1 in 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, what? It was like you had 07 and then 14.
There was one in between. We got.
Did you do that? Oh, the Simple Attraction tour. Did you do 09 as well?
Yeah.
But still, that's, 09 to 14, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And it'll be coming up on 10 years soon for you.
Yeah, don't say that.
Well, no, because she's going to come to Australia next year. She's going to do it.
She damn well better.
Yeah.
This song, yes, it's so nostalgia for me as well. And I quite often have these, I don't know, I feel foolish having these thoughts, but occasionally when I'm in the middle of a really wonderful experience, my body sort of, I don't know, almost separates a little bit, and I become nostalgic for what I'm experiencing at the time. Like, it's like, I know that there's nostalgia coming for this very moment, and I kind of have to remind myself to get back into the moment. Don't put it in the past before it's there. And
soak it in.
Yeah, exactly.
What does she say in like the Scarlet Stories or whatever, where she's like, you're just sitting in a cafe, and you turn around and somebody's coming up to you with a bowl of chili, and you meet eyes, and it's just heaven. It's like, I want to live in that. I want to be able to appreciate this fully. Just this, and it doesn't have to be, that's another thing. It doesn't have to be some, wild experience or something that, something like a tour. It could be, I just think today at work, I had a moment where I just felt extremely grateful and joyful for something that had just happened. And I needed to remind myself, like, ooh, this does not happen every day. Appreciate this. Appreciate this moment. Yeah. I got enough that I got it tattooed on my arm, like the I was here, piece, that it's just a constant reminder for me. Yeah.
That's
and to also not just try and live in the memories, because it's easy to want to live in nostalgia for the good things that were, the things that we miss, the things that we don't have now. And yeah, I find myself getting stuck in that.
I feel like one of the things that I'm doing on this trip is trying to convince myself. Sometimes I take a lot of convincing, even from myself, that there's this overwhelming desire to go back to who I was before I went through all of that traumatic relationship. And I keep reminding myself that I was 18. Like, I wasn't a fully formed person before that relationship. And so it's impossible to go back to being that person, but that doesn't negate who I am now in this moment. And in fact, all of those experiences, as unpleasant as they were, made me into the person that I am, who appreciates the world as I do now, and appreciates people and the values like trust and love and respect. Like these are, I might not be in this place right now had I not gone through that. And there's this real balance that I'm trying to play with, wanting to heal and move on, but also acknowledge the growth that has come from what I've been through.
That's so insightful. Yeah. I honestly, this, oh my gosh, this is so cheeseball. But I honestly use this song and kind of that idea of that you just talked about, that Tori has spoken about too. Like these are like, it's our body map, right? The history of our lives are like tattooed on our body. We can't get rid of these experiences. We also don't need them to define who we are. They are a part of who we are in our experience. We can choose how to feel about them now. I use that with like clients. I use that in therapy sessions with people because it makes so much sense to me, and it gives us autonomy, and it gives us the power to choose how we see the different pieces in our lives and create our narrative.
Absolutely. I'm curious, because of the journey that I'm doing, the physical around America journey, and the relation to the map. Have you spent much time in DC, Baltimore?
Yeah, I've been to DC a couple times. We took our 8th grade trip to Washington DC in middle school, and spent it like, did we spend a week there? We got to see a lot of the city. It's actually quite a beautiful city. I think quite clean. The monuments are beautiful. And there's just so much history in that city politically, obviously, for us here in the States. Have I been to Baltimore? No, I've never been to Maryland. And then I actually went to DC for there was a peaceful protest when I was in college that we went to, protesting the war. My friends and I and one of our professors, we just drove up. It's about a 12-hour drive from Ohio, where I'm from, and spent the night there, went to the protest, and then drove back home the next day. So I didn't really see anything.
Fair enough. You were there for the right reasons.
Yeah. So, but no, I haven't spent a lot of time there.
Fair.
And you know what? There's something so interesting about the song that I was just thinking about recently when listening to it. The lyric where she says, the day that she came, freezing that frame, right? Alluding to, when Tosh was born, when her baby was born, I'm assuming. The way that I connected to that and have connected to that is that moment when I decided to be fully myself, to like come out and accept all parts of me. And I have that memory of that day ingrained in my mind, almost like a movie. I mean, I can go through the day in my head of when that happened, so that it really is frozen in my mind, and I will never forget that. And that was such a huge piece of my life, right? And it almost was the split of my childhood, my adolescence into my adulthood. And so I almost see things coming out as almost like a different lifetime ago. And so that lyric is very poignant and special to me. Because there are moments of the previous life, or that life before, that I still do hold tight to, and that is still special to me, and relationships that I have with, a few people in my life and family members that I still hold tight to.
One of the lyrics that sticks out for me is, and we make it up as we go along. So much so I've even got it as like the screensaver on my tablet.
Yes.
Because I keep having to remind myself that, you can plan all you want, but like life happens and you just have to respond as it happens. And you don't always know what you're doing. There is no way to plan for every outcome. We really do just make it up as we go along.
Yeah. We have no control.
And for a writer of fiction, it's hard to acknowledge that you're not writing your own life.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to like that piece of being able to use our past to create our current narrative of our life. It's like that's how we gain the power. I think we have no clue of what the future holds, and we have no power over that. And for the most part, we can make decisions that will hopefully lead us in a certain direction, but we don't know what life is going to throw at us. And so and history is so important. It informs where we are now. I mean, in our personhood, for ourselves, as a collective, as a globe, as a global human race, here in the States, as Americans, it informs where we are, and it's important that we look back. I think, even if we would want to forget certain pieces, even the painful pieces, they're important parts of why we are where we are now.
That's like, I don't know if you've got to it yet, but the part in the podcast where Bailey and I are talking about sugar and if I could take 25 minutes out of the record books.
I literally just listened to that on my drive home from work, that part.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's that, well, where do you start and where do you stop if you're going to start erasing things from time? Like,
it's like those horrible like time travel movies, where it just gets so meta, and you're just like, oh, everything is all fucked up now. But you just don't screw with it. Don't screw with time.
Do you have any? I mean, outside of Gold Dust, do you have any? Or even outside of Tori, if you want, just how has music helped you heal from various things in your past?
It is the thing. Music is the thing that has saved me, honestly, from myself. It is the one constant in my life that I've had since as far as I can remember, before I could even talk. Like, it was important to me. So I think it may sound silly, but people have said this before, but like, honestly, to me right now, like, a life without music is not a life, is not worth living. Like, it is that important. It is a lifeline for me. It is how I connect with myself internally, and how I make sense of the world in many ways. When things don't make sense, when horrific acts happen, I go straight to my discography. I go straight to, and most of the time it is Tori. Like, it's the first one I'm going to most of the time. But
let's be honest.
Let's be honest. And it's interesting because I think that's how, like, I know the people that I'm closest to in my life know that about me as well. So, like, it's almost a running joke, like, oh, Jordan, what is he going to say about Tori today, or whatever, because like I see so much of my life through that lens. It is a lifeline.
It's so important. It's just such a big part of my world experience.
Yeah, I think, and going back, I think, like, when I was when Jules' Pieces of You came out, that was the one. That was the one that really changed everything for me. That, like, okay, I'm starting now. I have a voice, and I know what direction I'm going to go into musically. Like, this is real music. This is what I'm connecting to, and kind of led the way.
Yeah, I think that was, I bought 3 albums at about the same time that then very strongly directed my music taste going forward. It was
Which ones?
Pieces of You, Ode to My Family, The Cranberries, and Delirium's Karma album.
Okay.
And I just listened to them so heavily on repeat over and over and over. And then soon after that, Lannis's supposed former infatuation junkie joined the mix. Because this was before I knew Tori. And then I would have been having that sort of vibe going on for a while. And then I discovered Tori, and boom.
What was your first Tori album?
It was Little Earthquakes, but the first time I ever heard Tori wasn't Tori. I was in yeah, I know. I was in the music classroom at school, and we were all practicing for our sort of performance pieces. And my best friend, well, like my two good friends, one was playing the piano for the other one's piece, and so she was singing Winter, and I was just like, what is this? This is incredible. Like, I've not heard music like this before.
So beautiful.
Lyrics like this before. Like, when you're going to make up your mind, when you're going to love you as much as I do. Like, oh, like,
Yeah, yeah.
That's not fair. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, right.
And then so she lent me Little Earthquakes, and it was only a very short time before I owned everything. I just had to have it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And just how the discography unfolds. You know what? As you were telling me that story, I just remembered in the back of my mind. I think the reason why I did go out and I got to Venus and Back. Do you remember the Oxygen concert that she did for Scarlet's Walk? It was like there's this channel, I don't even know if it exists anymore, the Oxygen channel here in the States, and she did, like, you could vote for what the set list was, and it was just a short, like, whatever. She did Sort of Fairy Tale, she did Taxi Ride, she did Sneeze and Precious Things maybe, and that was my first. I remember being in my basement watching this unfold on the television. I was like mesmerized, and I think that was what did it for me.
Yeah, need to go buy the music now.
Yeah.
Oh, this was so lovely.
Yeah, I just love chatting with you.
Yeah,
you're so easy to chat with.
Oh, thank you.
it's just so incredible that, and almost unbelievable that I was just with you like days ago.
I know, but also we get to hang at the end of my trip too,
so excited. I can't wait for you to be here.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah, it is.
I'll have all the stories to tell you.
Oh yeah, I cannot wait.
I will be a different person.
Well, and hopefully I'll have some insight already because I'll be listening, to the podcast.
Yeah.
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 I love that you're doing this. I do.
Me too. I think it seems to be reaching people, and I'm glad for that.
Yes.
So what does this song signify for you, Michael? Like, in terms of how Time in Washington and how Gold Dust pieces into your journey of recovery, where does it kind of sit? What does it have? What did it have for you?
This song's so meant a lot to me for a long time because I think it's the perfect coda to this album. I think after all of the emotions and thoughts we've gone through on Scarlet's Walk, Gold Dust is really a sort of peaceful but also like swelling in the way that music swells. Like it's not just a and we're done. This is very much a take a moment to look back and remember what you've been through and acknowledge what you can and can't change. So when Tori came to Australia in 2006, that was the first time I saw her. She ran a competition where you had to say what your favourite Tori song was and why. And I chose Gold Dust for that competition at that time. And I didn't win the backstage passes, and I was very devastated about that and thought rorted, but that's the way love goes. For me, it's always just been that I was here line, and the way she says it with this sort of gentle urging, it really just reminds me that I can accept that I've been through what I've been through. While we were planning this episode, we really talked a lot about wanting to change the past. I've said on other episodes of this podcast that I have spent a long time wishing away my past. But I think one of the messages that comes from this song is that wishing away or mourning lost time, so to speak, is a waste of time. You're wasting your present by wanting a change that cannot happen. And so Gold Dust is just saying, like, there are good moments in your history no matter what, and it's led you to be where you are now. And if that's a stronger person looking forward to changing and bettering yourself, then that's Gold Dust.
As you're speaking, I was thinking a bit about a book that I call it the book that changed my life, which is called This Is How by Augustine Burroughs. And in it, there's a chapter where he talks about feeling haunted by your past. And this is something that we say quite a lot. Oh, my past is haunting me, or, you know, I can't move on from my past. And he kind of flipped it around to be like, well, your past isn't really doing anything. It just kind of exists where it exists, and it's quite happy being something that isn't going on for you anymore. It's not that the past haunts you, it's that you haunt it, you know, and you need to get to a point where you leave your past alone and let it be what it was. You can't really go back and heal it. You can only heal forward. You can only act forward. While it may change what the past means, in retrospect, it's not going to change what it is. Yeah, this song is absolutely that, and it's about kind of taking on board how hurtful or harmful things might have been, but what that should prompt you to do is value what's good in the present all the more than you ever could have if you hadn't survived what you'd survived, hadn't gone through what you'd gone through. Like, there's a line, something about, you know, there's a great tasting chili, I think we're going to read it later, from Scarlet Stories, and when you have that, that's the best thing ever.
How about I read it now, because that's exactly where my mind was going as well. So in Scarlet Stories, which is the extended interview Tori did track by track of Scarlet's Walk, when it came to Gold Dust, she says, Gold Dust is very much about being other people and feeling how they feel and feeling how you felt at another time when you've been another place. And it really isn't your past, because somehow those frames are written on your body and they've made you what you are. Nothing is gone, it's just on your body map. And this project has been very much about finding, I guess, my body map. I think if you're going to really write a work about a road trip and about America and who she is, then you have to go see her in all her glory and all her bad fast food joints and truck stops and everything in between. You know, you can't just go coast to coast and then do the flyover. It is flyover country trip. You really have to experience it. And the crazy thing about it is the gold that we found, you found it so much when you were not even thinking you're in it. And you turn around and you see this pair of eyes and somebody puts a bowl of chili in front of you. It's heaven. It doesn't get any better than that. And that's what we're finding. So many of our experiences on this trip that we value above others are the serendipitous connections we're making with people. And things that we didn't even really have planned, but then, here we are finding this joyous moment. For an example of that is last night, where I had booked with Linda, my agent, to stay with her while we were traveling around months in advance. And it was the only date that we could really do. And for a long time, it was a sad date to choose with her because it looked like I would miss out on the launch of her debut novel. The universe intervened, and it turned out that she had to launch her book on the night that we were staying with her in Woodstock, New York. And so Bailey and I got to attend the launch and meet her friends and her writing community and connect with people. And like, her entire family has been inundating the house that we're staying in. And so we've had big cook-ups and bagel breakfast this morning. And Bailey finally got her peach cobbler
Oh my God, it was so delicious. It was the first one Linda's ever made as well, which is just, as you say, there's just something that, and I think part of what's made that so available to us is that we haven't spent time grieving the things that haven't worked out. And I think that's been a really great approach, that we've gone, well, no harm done. If it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be. And we allow something to fill in that space. And I would say in every case that what has filled the space has been an incredibly powerful lesson or an incredibly powerful story to tell, and contributes very directly to what we're actually doing here, which is learning about what healing requires.
Which is sometimes just letting go of the control.
Absolutely.
The conversation that I was having with you and Alexandra when we were having brunch in New York, where I found myself, Alex asked, what do you want out of this trip? And I had to admit that sometimes I find myself thinking, you know, why aren't I healed yet? But that's not a helpful way to think about it. And so I think just acknowledging that we have to relinquish control to our own healing on some level as well, and lean into it bodily rather than with that mental mindset of needing to orchestrate everything.
And understanding, you know, this is something I was going to mention this episode, which was, what does healing even mean? You know, and what status are you hoping to reach? And that can be one of the biggest dangers, is you're like, oh, I want to feel healed, or I want to heal from this thing. And it's like, well, you've given yourself an unachievable task. It's an unachievable goal to feel healed because you don't know what that even means. You would have no way of determining whether you have or you haven't. So I went through a quite significant sexual trauma when I was 19 with someone who I loved and I considered my best friend. Took advantage of a situation and, you know, speaking of body maps, you know, really violated my body and my privacy and my power, and changed the course of my life. And unfortunately, it wasn't too long after that I was assaulted again. But when it had been about 5 years after, and a photo turned up on a friend of mine's Facebook of the night that it happened. And I couldn't remember much about when it had happened. My brain had kind of erased as much detail as possible in order to protect me, I feel. But this photo showed up of him. I've shared it on Instagram before because he's lying in my lap and you can't really see him, but you can see me and how happy I am because I remember feeling this great intimacy with him that night. And so I have the date now of when that happened. And around 10 years, I was in London and I was like, okay, it's been 10 years since that happened, and what have I done? How have I grown? How have I healed? And it was at that point that I realized I hadn't actually given myself any definition of what that would be. And so that was a big mark of 10 years to go, right, I want to feel comfortable in my nudity. And comfortable in my body in any kind of setting. I want to be able to walk into any setting and feel comfortable in my body. Not just like willy-nilly, but like I want to feel like I have access to comfort in my body in any setting. I want to have an active and healthy sex life that I enjoy. And I want to feel like that my sexual trauma doesn't kind of define me. That it is something that I choose to use. And so it took another 2 years. On the 12th anniversary, I was with my boyfriend at the time, and I was able to kind of say, yep, I've ticked off all these things. And while I have my days where it seems stranger than others, but on the whole, I would say that it is something that I have healed from by my own definition.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that's part of my problem. I don't really have a definition of what that necessarily means. I do want to feel less haunted by it, and I know we've just talked about
Yeah,
that.
well, literally, yeah.
But for me, that's a body thing. I mean, 3 years ago now, on the 2-year anniversary of the breakup, I performed a piece at Queer Stories, and it was all about the ring that my ex and I, the rings that we had exchanged. We never got married or formally committed in any way, but we did have, we gave each other rings on different occasions. And this was also the 2-year anniversary of the plebiscite for same-sex marriage in Australia. And
So you broke up on the day that they announced the yes vote?
No, I broke up about a month before, but I was not living in my own home that I was paying for. I was couch surfing at a friend's place the day that they announced, and everyone, like, it was very overwhelming for me. But the thing was, I was going through the extended breakup in the lead up, so I was actively fighting for marriage equality at the same time as trying to negotiate the end of a 15-year relationship. And
which the other person was not willing to let you go from.
Yes, exactly. And so the piece I performed at Queer Stories is all about that, and about this. I still feel the ghost of that ring on my finger, even to this day. And every time I notice it not there, I'm overwhelmed with all kinds of emotions attached to that. If you want to listen to that Queer Stories, I'm going to put it up on as a bonus extra for my Patreon supporters. Yay. At the $10 level. So thank you for the people supporting me there. You'll get to listen to my funny and devastating piece that I wrote a couple of years, 3 years ago now. But it's that kind of thing, like, this is my body reminding me, not necessarily me going out of my way to wallow. I'm definitely not trying to wallow. And so part of me is like, well, how long until my body forgets that I used to wear a ring?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
It's just, like, we have this very much in common, and if you haven't read Body Keeps the Score, I'd recommend it. I have a copy, so I will lend it to you.
I bought it as
great.
an ebook, but I haven't got around to reading it.
Yeah, it's, from the bits that I have read, it's quite overpowering, because it's an acknowledgement that our connections to our bodies are very limited, and that there does have to be some sort of work done to connect us. So, like, doing things like seeing a PT and exercising, I think will go a long way in the right direction. But, for a very long time, it was, for me, the feeling of penetrative sex was sickening. Like, to actually, when in that moment where, there's that's first point of entry, where that sort of, where, the lover I was with would sort of first meet resistance, it would just throw me into a state of, like, complete nausea, heat, like I would burn up, like it was horrific. It wasn't until my last birthday that I finally felt able to push past that, because I wanted to, it's like, and I'm not gonna lie and say there isn't some part of you that holds on bodily to things, but there's this idea that, we can think our way out of our body feeling something, and when the reality is, it probably won't be until you place another ring on that finger and feel the connection to that, or, there'll be other things that you do that are body based, but, you kind of, that takes an understanding of your body, and this book gives a lot of guidance around, like, where you hold trauma, because while you may feel it on your hand, where it's actually, I had a masseuse years ago tell me that all the trauma, he could feel it in my thighs. It was like, all of this is in, like, your thigh, and in this inner part here. He's like, let's, like, try and massage that out. And of course I'm bawling my eyes out as he touches it, so there's a whole bunch of stuff to be done that you can do.
It's funny, these serendipitous conversations, like just this morning over bagel brunch, I was having a really wonderful conversation with Jude Epstein, Linda's sister, and she's a healthcare professional and works a lot with from a trauma perspective, and she's also very much into movement therapy and dance therapy, and she Like The Body Keeps the Score came up in discussion this morning too. So it's certainly not the first time. In fact, I think I brought it up because I have listened to an interview with the author talking about various therapy styles and the ones that are more bodily involved rather than necessarily just talk therapy, which I do find incredibly valuable, but I am also very keen to explore other forms of therapy. And I mean, this whole trip is about music therapy in
right.
one way, shape, or form.
And therefore about dance therapy.
Yeah, just leaning into your body responding the way it responds and acknowledging that.
The other thing that this song is about is Tori's pregnancy. And a big factor in it from interviews that I've read is that for her, at the height of her fame, Tori was kind of known for singing about and talking about miscarriages. And I can't remember how many she actually had to go through before she fell pregnant and had her daughter, Tash. And I think in this song, in Gold Dust, it is also about acknowledging from that body map stuff that she could no longer be the miscarriage maven of music. She kind of had to make a decision to let that go and what it would mean for her, and not just about surviving miscarriage, but surviving sexual violence, as her debut single had been about. This is a person who'd been in a lot of pain and had sung about it, and Scarlett's Walk was kind of a change into a very different kind of reflection. And what was about to happen was an album called The Beekeeper, which was a big dividing force in the fanship because everyone sort of thought she'd gone soft or that she'd become too whimsical in motherhood. And, I love Gold Dust for speaking to that part of us that does hold on to our trauma as a very precious thing because it helps us feel familiar, it helps us feel defined, it helps us feel different. But at one point we have to acknowledge that there's more to us than our trauma, and if we keep roping it in, then we're never going to get past it, and which is what we say we want to do. But do we really? And what does it mean if, for me, what does it mean if I'm a consent educator who isn't talking about surviving her own, breach of consent, or healing from it? How, I wrote a play a few years ago called Burlesque by Force, and it was like the more I performed it, at the same time my therapy journey was healing me from it. I went, can I even play this part anymore? And what does that mean if I can't perform this work that I love that people want to see? So there's kind of that element to it as well.
But then I also feel like there's a lot of just genuine nostalgia for genuine good times in this too.
Absolutely.
Like, it is very much a beautiful song. Like carrying photographs with you of moments and people that you love. I mean, I know I'm doing that on this trip.
Yeah, who are you carrying?
My grandmother, who passed away the night before we left Australia.
Yeah, right.
I've got her photograph inside my notebook, and so everywhere I go and every note I take, she's close to that. And so I think the beauty of this song is it makes room for all things.
Yeah. I have the funeral cards of my nan and my brother with me in my notebook as well, so I'm right there with you.
Do you have any advice for Virginia?
I do. And it's tricky advice for me to give because I'm right in the thick of it right now, and it was advice you gave me, which is you have to recover as long as it takes, which feels like a very ironic statement to make in someone's 37-year artistic work. There is this notion that you shouldn't be grieving after a certain amount of time. That is such bullshit, because grieving takes a bunch of different shapes. And just because I'm not crying about my brother doesn't mean I'm not grieving for him. In fact, this very trip is a is a grieving process, because for me, grief is enmeshed in my celebration of life. You know, I transitioned after he died, and it was for me, that's also a part of the grieving process, was acknowledging that there was only one life to live and I only had one shot, and I couldn't be wasting my time being something for other people's convenience and my own. It was, you know, to stay identifying as male would have been very convenient and would have made things very easy, and the notion that I would make life harder on myself by doing this was unfathomable to me after everything that I've endured. But it is a part of the grief process of going, well, what would Kale want? And his life teaches me to treat mine as valuable, and it's worth the work, and I should treat my life as... And, you know, I was having a chat this morning with Linda's girlfriend, who, you know, had these big revelations on her 59th birthday. You know, there's time enough for healing in all its forms. And it was very hard for me to hear that when you said, look, the healing from, you know, your relationship ending is going to take as long as it takes. My favourite part of this song, and the lyric that I lean on the most, is that sort of pre-chorus, well, you make it up as you go along, we make it up as we go along. Mm-hmm. And the best thing I learned about grief was that you do what works until it stops working, and then you do something else. And that's kind of how you should approach it. Like, you know, oh, it works for me to party a whole bunch. I'll do that until the partying doesn't quite help me anymore. So now I'm going to start staying in bed and masturbating all day for, you know, for a whole bunch of time. Or I'm going to go, you know, have sex with a whole bunch of other people. Or I'm going to...
Or what I affectionately recall my sex rampages.
Yes, literally. Well, like, this was the thing. After I got back from the funeral, that's kind of what I did. Like, it was this very overpowering zest for life that just caused me to be very sexually active. But then it's like, you know, go to galleries, or spend time with family, or spend time away from family, or run away to New Zealand, you know, like, whatever. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. What was your advice for Virginia on this one?
Mine is to not punish yourself over the could haves and should haves. And I say this as if I'm giving this sage advice to Virginia, but like, this is literally me saying it to myself in this moment.
Well, that's what this, yeah, it's literally what this whole segment is for, is like...
Because like, one of my biggest hurdles is that I still am unable to forgive myself for putting myself through that. I'm not saying that I inflicted it upon myself. I'm not saying that I am the cause of my problems. But when I knew that they were happening and I repeatedly chose to stay with them, I see that as an intense personal betrayal. And I am struggling very hard to forgive myself for that. And ignoring the advice from people, or just common sense even, that I was here. I was, but I still am. I am still here, and I can go forward from this. And so, yeah, try not to focus too much on could haves and should haves. Acknowledge what you've been through and move on.
Yeah. I would say as well, like, the hardest thing for me to deal with when I went through that similar kind of statement, which was, you know, staying in the bed with him. This is, you know, very microcosmic kind of level, but staying in the bed with him and not being more active in stopping what was about to happen to me. And I had a conversation with myself as he went to get condoms and lubricant, neither of which he ended up using. It was like, this is bad, and this will be bad, and you don't want this, and he doesn't want to do this with you. It's just kind of all falling in this direction, and this is not good. Don't do this. And it just kind of happened anyway. And there was that internal voice going, I told you this would happen. And now look, you know. But I think what I got to, for what it's worth to you or to anyone listening to this, is like the past doesn't need your forgiveness, in the same way that in a relationship, you know, there's no amount of sorry that that person could say to you that would enable you to really fully forgive them. All you need genuinely is the behavior to change.
Yeah.
And so all you can really do is acknowledge what went wrong and what you did that you don't endorse, and not do that anymore. And as the evidence of that builds, that part of you that you feel holds something against your present will trust you again, because it will see evidence that you have changed as a person, even though it's the same human. Does that make any fucking sense?
It does. It's like the amount of people, including my therapist, that try and get me to reframe it simply by saying, like, some of these things that you beat yourself up over, you were 21 or whatever at the time. If you were talking to a 21-year-old who is not yourself and had just gone through this, what would you say to them? Like, you would be a lot more understanding and forgiving and compassionate. But it's only because it's yourself and you're holding your 21-year-old self to your current moral standards.
Which were built by your 21-year-old self, might I add.
Exactly.
Like, you know?
Like, that's just it. Like, it's not as if you made those choices and allowed those things yesterday.
Yeah.
It would have been a very different scenario had that started to unfold yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of brings me, I know that when we talked about this, I talked a lot about how, as queer people in particular, we aren't built to have a lot of autonomy or a lot of power. And so that kind of puts us in a state when we enter into our first relationships of behaving as though, how lucky I got anyone to love me.
Yeah.
And of course the person who loves me is like, you know, a mentally unwell, abusive person, because that's what we all are on some level, because of the way society treats queer people. And for those of you who donated to the GoFundMe, you'll have access to the text of a piece that I wrote as a sort of reward called Love of a Child, which is very much about this. And I feel that kind of applies. Or you can listen to the audio of it on Spotify, as recorded by the incredible Will Spartalis and engineered by Matt Katz. And the whole piece is about, there's sort of two chunks to it, which are, the first is about what parents do to queer children, and how they harm them, and what that sets up for their relationships, where the inspiration I had for it was about writing about love as if it were a child born of two or however many people, and what happens when you don't allow that love or that relationship embodied to go off and do its own thing and find another place in the world other than between you and the person who are no longer together. Anyway, have a listen and let us know what you think. It's one of my favourite pieces I've ever written, and is a sort of B-side to the upcoming collection. So if you head to Turner Wrote on Instagram, you'll see all the updates as well. TurnerWrote.
So, shall we swap some songs?
Yeah, seeing as that's not my song swap. I have another one.
What song came to mind while we were talking about Gold Dust?
A couple did. The first one that kind of came up was a song called Universe by Savage Garden. If you haven't figured out that I'm a 90s girl, like a late 90s noughties girl, then I don't know what rock you've been sleeping under. But there's a lyric in Universe which is like, there's a universe inside your heart. You've got to let me know so you can be free, baby. You wanted it so much, and now that it's over, you don't know what you want. And I feel like that could apply to many of the songs on Scarlet. But the one that just jumped into my mind as we were talking was Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis. Simply for, Tori also covered it.
Yeah.
But there's some lyrics in it which is like, please don't put your life in the hands of a rock and roll band who'll throw it all away. And then, you know, don't look back in anger, I heard you say, which is, it's just all about that, you know, looking back, and don't look back in anger, you know, feel the positivity of the things that have happened, and take forward the lessons of what you do and don't want for your future. So those were mine. What about for you?
The two that came to mind for me, I have a feeling I might have mentioned one of them on the last episode.
It's likely.
But it's been a while since we recorded it, so
Because
perhaps...
she loves her Anne Brun.
Well, it's not Anne Brun.
Is it not?
No, Today is a Good Day by Anna Turnheim, where there's a lyric in it where she says, I used to be lonely, now I'm just alone. She goes, I've got so many, now that we're not together, I've got so many holes to fill, at least 7 nights a week, killing time. I used to be lonely, now I'm just alone. And it is just that reframing your current situation, because yeah, I used to be so lonely inside that relationship that I thought was so committed and so what I was hunting, and now I see that wasn't the case, and you know, being in a relationship is not the ultimate goal in life if you're not getting what you need from your partner and they're not getting what they need from you, because that is the point of a relationship, or partners. Like, because let's face it, there's so many different ways to relation. Yeah, and the other one that sprang to mind in a sort of leapfrog way from that was Emiliana Torini's Today Has Been Okay, which again is sort of that grief and reminiscing a relationship that has faded, but today has been okay.
Yeah.
And
I love that song, and I've leaned on it a lot since I first heard it on Grey's Anatomy that time.
So many songs that I love, people tell me have been on the Grey's Anatomy
I genuinely thought, so there was a time when me and Michael were together and we used to share songs that kind of were communicative about our relationship. And I really thought that you just pulled them all off the Grey's Anatomy soundtrack, because they're literally every song.
I've never watched
been
that
on
show
Grey's
once
Anatomy.
in my life and have never
Yeah,
listened
you
to
and the
soundtrack.
music supervisor must be cut from the same cloth.
But
It's a great song.
the other reason I love that song is that there's this sort of very ambiguous, but the way I read it, verse about the preacher lost his son, who was known by all in town. They found him with another son of God. So to me, that's very much about being outed within a religious sort of setting and how that affects relationships. So yeah, Today Has Been Okay is a beautiful song that I find quite deep on so many levels.
Now
even-
available on the Michael's Walk Spotify playlist.
Yeah, check it out. Well, that is episode
Episode 5, I think.
5.
Episode 5.
Yes.
It was like a gold dust in our hands.
It was. And technically the end of the album, but that's because we're doing things our way.
Mm-hmm.
And so next we have a short little jaunt through your cloud on our way to New York City. Your cloud's a special one.
Oh, well, Gold Dust was also a bit of Baltimore, and we did stop there for Dunkin' Donuts
Yeah.
and a little skip along. If you haven't seen the video.
If you go check out my Instagram,
Or your TikTok as well, it's on his.
Oh yeah, I put it on my TikTok as well. I was determined to basically reenact that girl opening, but using Baltimore as the music. Baltimore, for those of you who don't know, was Ellen Amos's debut single that was released as part of a competition, I believe. She won a competition to write a song about Baltimore, and it is the cheesiest piece of like, oh my god, it is just Cheese Factory, that was song. It could be 80s sitcom set in Baltimore theme song.
Oh no, like I would say like 60s. It's so,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's very much of that sort of Mary Tyler Moore kind of era. And what, like, some of the lyrics, like,
Well-
the birds are great.
The birds are the best.
The birds are the best.
in
My
Baltimore.
God. It's just
And we'll work hand in hand to make
a better
this place a
land.
better land.
Oh.
In Baltimore. Love is on your side.
Stop.
Okay. I'm sorry. Anyway.
We'll see you in your cloud.
See you in your cloud.
The Michael's Walk podcast acknowledges that the journey they are undertaking takes place on the sacred and unceded nations of many proud Indigenous peoples. From the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, we are fortunate to call home, to each and every Native American tribe's land we'll set foot on as we travel. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and humbly acknowledge their sovereignty.